good to be with all of you. Oh, I feel empowered with this microphone situation. They like that for Zoom, certainly, but it feels too much for the room sometimes. I want to tell you a story that sometime around my 20th year, I was wandering about in my college's citadel of learning, Mudd Library it was called, and stumbled on a book of photographs titled A Hidden Wholeness, The Visual World of Thomas Merton. Here I was, a fledgling religion major, and I had not yet heard of the world-famous monk and scholar who had made friendly contact with figures as diverse as Martin Luther King Jr., D.T. Suzuki, Thich Nhat Hanh, and the Dalai Lama, and who had lived at a monastery and later in a hermitage only one state away from me. I was in college in Ohio. He had lived in Kentucky. He had died in 1968, before I was in college. But I was smitten when I saw his work. He became a monk in 1941 and lived, as I said, in Kentucky at the Cistercian Abbey of Our Lady of Gethsemane, which I visited for a day and a night later on, until his death in 68. In 1965, Merton received permission he had long sought from the Cistercian order to live as a hermit in a cabin in the monastery's forest. Around the time I happened on Merton, I was feeling uncomfortable in my own skin, a condition that continues to this day intermittently, but is less prevalent than it was there. I was fretting about how I was going to get by in this prickly, difficult world, and beginning to think that I too should become a hermit, living a secluded life. I figured then I could spend my time writing poems and smoking copious amounts of a sacred herb. That was my grand plan, my thinking, if you could dignify it by that name. But of course, I was not truly called to become a hermit, one who retreats from the world not out of fear or avoidance, but in order to more completely embrace God. I don't know if I'll ever have that vocation. Merton, as a hermit, remained connected to his faith and to the monastery, going there for worship and to give instruction to novices. But as he later wrote, "In the monastery I have duties, obligations, since here I am a monk. When I have accomplished these, I return to the woods where I am nobody." So becoming a hermit is a very high art indeed. It's an attainment not of the ego, but of the soul. An achievement of ego extinction, this becoming nobody. Ram Dass, in his times of teaching, used to talk about how we go through the world trying to figure out who we are. And it's all a course of somebody training. We're training ourselves. You know, I know Glenn, boy, he's really somebody. That kind of thing. We try to become somebody. And he said, only later, when we see that that did not lead to what we were really seeking, we begin to embrace nobody training. Merton was a high achiever in nobody training. Now, I did not become a hermit. I've realized since that what I became instead was a hermit crab. Now, I don't mean that I somehow developed into an Anamoran decapod crustacean of the superfamily Paguridae, using a scavenged mollusk shell to protect my fragile exoskeleton. I realize that's probably what you were thinking. But I did retreat into a shell of sorts, away from significant friendships and meaningful work, in an effort to protect my fragile ego skeleton. A song I wrote at that time had the repeated chorus, "I think I'll go in hiding," hiding away. I'll play it for you later. You'll be so thrilled. Now, I'm telling you all this right now because what I'm talking about today is how we may encounter God, not in retreat from the world, but in engagement with all we encounter. Case in point, recently when discouraged about writing a new talk, this very talk, it turned out that because I have a relationship with someone, they told me, "It will come, you often feel this way," and suggested a path forward, a different approach to the week leading up to the Sunday I would give the talk. I followed her advice. And later that morning at a store, when a checker asked me the question she surely asks everyone, "So how's your day going?" I said, "Better. Empathy and communication really help." Her face brightened with not just a cashier smile, but a genuine smile. You know the difference. And she said, "Totally. Also compassion and hope." It was such a nice moment between two souls, variously costumed in bodies, tattoos, jewelry, and clothes. The jewelry and tattoos were features of the other person's costume, but connecting in unity around our shared experience. I left that place with hope in my heart and talk ideas bubbling through my mind. As Albert Schweitzer, the great humanitarian born 150 years ago this year, whom I afflict everyone with mentions of in each talk I give, Schweitzer once wrote, "Sometimes our light goes out but is blown again into flame by an encounter with another human being. Each of us owes the deepest thanks to those who have rekindled this inner light. Thank you, Sarah, most compassionate Trader Joe's cashier, for your light and for the rekindling." Unity's third principle says we create our life experiences through our way of thinking. Or in another version, because there's no one way to say these things, we are co-creators with God, shaping our world through thoughts held in mind. To all of which I dare to add this important corollary. Because God is not a remote, ethereal deity out there somewhere, but is a divine presence embodied in you, in me even, in our pets, certainly in our pets, in the birds, in the forest, in our microbiomes, in all of creation. Because of this, what may have the most impact on each of us is the God we experience when we engage in true communion with another soul, when another's light rekindles our own. For most of us, God is found not in the process of living as a hermit, and certainly not as a hermit crab, but in daily engagement with all we encounter. It's why I feel so privileged to speak to you about these deep concerns of the heart and soul. It's why when the veil is lifted, I see God in the person who checks my groceries or tows my car, should that need to happen, in the patient who shares honestly about her daily struggles or moments of success, and when I'm truly in tune with this God vision in anyone I pass in a crowded store or sidewalk or hallway. God is manifest in you as in me. God was not incarnated once and only once. Get it right now, only available today, in Yeshua of Nazareth, but when each of us came into the world as well. A decade ago, Sally spoke to me.
That's been a long time.
I know, but she spoke to me in May of 2015 saying, if I'm gone for a month in June, could you water the plants and take care of everything? I said, all right, what's up?
I think your exact words were, Sally, what are you doing?
Right? But what she did is she launched herself on a month-long walk around our beautiful Olympic Peninsula, protesting military jets that engage in training maneuvers above towns and wild places throughout the entire peninsula area. Machines of war that terrify wild animals and create harmful high decibel conditions for all in their flight path. Because she got some publicity through media like the Port Townsend Leader and Peninsula Daily News and through social media, she found she drew support. People housed her, gave her meals.
Pulled over on the side of the road, lean out their head, go, are you Sally? Because I had this Holders flag and I was dressed all in bright pink so nobody would run over me. And they'd just say, are you Sally? I'd go, well, yeah.
Yeah, like, who else do you think I am?
Do you need some food? Do you want a place to stay? I'm like, well, sure.
It was pretty
It was
remarkable.
very remarkable.
Each weekend, I would drive out to wherever she'd gotten to, spending a couple of nights with her and then departing. It is not easy to leave one's mate by the side of a highway, dressed in pink and carrying a guitar and an earth flag. I'll tell you that right now. But she had a mission, touching hearts and souls, doing her part to rekindle the inner light of those she encountered. And she was making friends as she walked along that highway, as she invariably does, as we all may do in our travels if we're not hermits or hermit crabs. People showed up, and the highway she walked became one of connection and love, in addition to one of sore feet that walked many tired miles and wore out 3 pairs of shoes. Social and political conditions in our country and in the world as a whole have not improved miraculously to near perfection in the decades since Sally made her walk. I think we all recognize that. This is not to say that we should abandon efforts we might make to create our world personally through thoughts held in mind. We must do that. But it is also to recognize that virtuous and compassionate individuals are engaged in a perennial struggle against darker forces in our larger world. In 1959, the above-mentioned Thomas Merton wrote to Ernesto Cardenal, a former brother at the Gethsemani Monastery who had moved to Nicaragua and had become a leader in liberation theology. It's a Catholic theology that focuses on social justice. And Merton wrote to his former brother, "The world is full of great criminals with enormous power, and they are in a death struggle with each other." Heavy stuff, written in 1959. It is a huge gang battle using well-meaning lawyers and policemen and clergymen as their front, controlling papers, means of communication, and enrolling everybody in their armies. It feels like these words from so long ago could have been written this morning, as our planet sees cruel autocrats in power and a world facing threats to fundamental democratic values, values of compassion, human rights, human decency. America, which at one time at least gave lip service to being on the right side of history, At the highest levels of government, seems like it no longer supports the values I've just listed. So what are we to do? Drawing on ideas from today's talk, I want to suggest there are perhaps three choices. Any one of us may follow the eremitical, how do you like that adjective? It just refers to hermits. The eremitical tradition, withdrawing from the world, becoming a hermit, living a life of asceticism, seclusion, and prayer. As I mentioned, I had toyed with this idea as a young man, but not seriously, really motivated by fear, which is not the genuine starting place for the life of the mystic. And it would seem that very few of us truly have that vocation. Now, another popular choice would be that of hermit crab. On this well-trodden path, many Americans, I believe, and I'm somewhat saddened to say, withdraw from engagement with serious issues into a shell of self-indulgence, basking in our numerous privileges, safe lives, lots of Netflix, plenty of chips, coffee, ice cream, and beer, sometimes all at once. The world may go to hell in a handbasket, we say, but the hurt isn't going to happen to me. Not in my demographic, not in my town, on my street, not at my home, until perhaps it does. And clearly this approach works for us only so long as we ignore MLK's words, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I feel that if you are with me today, it's most likely you would opt for neither of these first two choices, hermit or hermit crab. The third way, the alternative to turning from the world, either spiritually or self-indulgently, is one of engagement from a higher place. Perhaps we could call this approach that of freedom's highway, where we openly meet, dialogue, and journey with friends from all across our small, imperiled planet. On this path of spiritually communing, we take stock of a troubled world, viewing it with an open-eyed, though perhaps tearful, gaze, and pledge that we will be part of a solution of love, of hope, of engagement, of community, no matter what inequities or iniquities transpire on the global stage. With our feet on this road, we vow to be counted among those who help, those who heal, those who give succor in a broken world of straitened circumstances and reduced choice. It's the path my great teacher Albert Schweitzer took. I always have to mention him, writing tirelessly to contacts all over the world and coming together in the early 1950s with allies like Albert Einstein and Bertrand Russell to protest against nuclear weapons and tests. In a 1957 speech on Radio Oslo, I'll quote it in case you don't remember from when you listened to it originally. The end of further experiments with atom bombs would be like the early sun rays of hope, which suffering humanity is longing for. And in 1959, in a letter to a youth leader in Stuttgart, Germany, he wrote, "If mankind," and this is gendered language of his time, I would write humankind today, but if humankind is not to perish after all the dreadful things it has done and gone through, then a new spirit must emerge. And this new spirit is coming not with a roar, but with a quiet birth. not with grand measures and words, but with an imperceptible change in the atmosphere, a change in which each of us is participating, and which each of us regards as a quiet boon. Become quiet, capable, kind-hearted people, he wrote, striving for the spiritual piety to which Jesus' words show us the way. The demands of the spiritual path are many. So much easier to just hang out with the Netflix and ice cream and all that. And in his letters, Schweitzer repeatedly expressed his weariness from the tremendous workload he shouldered year after year. In 1946, he wrote to one of his biographers, Dr. George Seaver. And by the way, I never write to any of my biographers. I feel like that would give them a leg up. I don't want to show favoritism. So I like them all to do their work independently, and just letting you know. He wrote to this fellow doctor who had taken on the job of writing his life story. I thank God who has given me the health and strength to live this life in such an onerous climate. I have a couple of people here I didn't see before, and I've been talking about Schweitzer nonstop this year, but I'll just mention, if anyone doesn't realize what he means, he established a hospital pretty much on the equator in Africa. And he refused to put up a thermometer outside so that any staff members could never see what the temperature was. Just keep on trucking. Don't even think about it. So he said it was a health and strength to live in such an onerous climate. He was so grateful for that, with so many demands constantly being made on me from all sides. I am sustained, he wrote, by the knowledge that I am granted the privilege of devoting myself to suffering people, and also by the thought of noble-minded friends who enable me to continue my work. The privilege of devoting ourselves to suffering people. I devote my professional life to helping suffering people, and it's a pain in the neck sometimes. I'll tell you that, right? It's so high-minded to stay in that purposeful, compassionate frame of mind and not just go, oh, would you stop misunderstanding this stuff and being so ambivalent and push-pull, and just get your recovery together. Little bit of my inner thoughts there, sorry. This privilege of helping suffering people may be ours if we choose it. And there will be no shortage of opportunity in the days to come. We would do well also to remember Schweitzer's advice to those who saw something heroic in his model and wished to emulate him. He wrote, only a person who can find value in every sort of activity and can devote themselves to everything with a full consciousness of duty, he wrote, has the inward right to undertake some out of the ordinary activity, instead of that which falls naturally to them. We can only continue in our work, humble though it may be, as a part of the new spirit that will yet sustain love and heal this world, when we too are part of a company, a community, a communion of the Spirit. So no matter what transpires, let us join together in spiritual alliance with one another. Let us continue to find ways to connect, serve, and heal those whose hearts are breaking. These are troubling times indeed. But let us walk on in service, relighting the spiritual flame of those we meet on freedom's highway. This road of love and compassion where all may travel together. That's what I came here to say. Thank you.